Well, I just not closed out of it. Are you ready to go back into it? Okay, view, camera. I don't know, I saw you guys, it was sideways. Oh, there you are. You're sideways again though. Portrait instead of landscape. So I guess it matters. Yeah, it's not. It's not a big deal. If you're on the screen, it's yeah, Corey, can you read that?
I read it.
Yeah.
Not really. Well, I can't read the Judges 61 and 1 through 2 as God set up
Corey's as close as you can get.
If I sit there and concentrate on it, I can read it.
Hold on, no, I don't have my speakers on. Yeah, I talked to him. I'm not sure. Who's leading service? You? Huh? Is that next week? There's no away games this week, except for tomorrow.
I don't know what's going on. These are 2:35.
Yeah, I don't know. I gotta think about it.
It's Morgantown game that leaves at 12. Do we need to
I'm taking the day that
That's
day.
on Friday. Oh.
Yeah.
Unless I read
I'm taking the whole day. The other two, I don't know. Just because
Taze Valley's a long.
I won't be able to
Eat
go.
where the band goes because they go to Blaze Pizza. Well, I mean Taze Valley. Last time they stayed out till like 3 o'clock.
We
That's not Taze Valley. It was late.
Really?
Yeah, we didn't get to stay. I just know because Landon complained so much to me that day.
I don't think that was Taze Valley. I thought that was Morgantown.
No, it was Taze Valley. We didn't go to Morgantown this year. I remember he was like, we had to watch Josiah dunk every time he came down the court. It was so boring.
He is lying to you. He is lying through his teeth. I told y'all he's the devil.
Trying to get Ron in, and he was just in the tractor business, and I can't get her.
You better interrupt him then.
We ready?
Yeah, we're ready.
Good evening. Start our evening service tonight. And how about we start with prayer this evening. Maybe we'll take prayer requests over here on the left, since we're about even down tonight. We'll start over here on the left. Someone with a spoken prayer request.
Remember me and my family. Continue to remember my 2 brothers. Remember my grandchildren. Continue to remember everything.
How about over here? Come on over here.
My family, real Chris and Michelle, real Chris is a grandmother of that family. And remember my 2 sisters and my niece, it's a nursing home here in Closed out. I think this is the one got to learn to do. And remember Dave D and all the ones that are sick, I had to from the church.
John, we always start in prayers. Let's keep our young people and leaders in our prayers. We have unsaved loved ones, John, Sandy, kids in prayers. There's several people work with different situations, and those that's lost their loved ones. Again, special prayer requests for a gentleman that just got a lot of issues going on in his life, and I'd ask the church just to take upon and just keep him uplifted in your prayers. Keep Whack Matt and Asher in your prayers, and of course Matt's family, Deb and Sue and Bob and Paul and Nick, that entire family there. We ask you to also keep us in your prayers. Let's remember Carol and Tommy, Hope and Kim and Scott. There's just others out there, Janice, just several others out there, Jamie and her family. Yeah.
Y'all would, I'd like you to remember both my parents and my aunt, Naomi Williams, and also her son, Thomas Williams, who had some health issues as well. So I'd like you to remember that. Any other spoken requests tonight?
It's for, Marty Scott passed away today too. I think it came around on the prayer chain. So let's definitely remember the family there.
Remember Brett, it looks like he will be deployed to Kuwait in July.
How about unspoken requests? Any of those? Let's all stand this evening. Jeff, I'm going to ask you to lead us out and pray over our service as well, and we'll take our knees to the Lord this evening. All right. Did we have a song prepared this evening for the congregation? Song leader and musicians.
Let's just say musicians and song help.
Okay. What are we singing?
Page 31. I do have my glasses this time. Page 31, please. Stand if you would.
To God be the
good. Including our instruments. Someone have a testimony tonight. Maybe a song prepared for this evening.
Great place to be this evening. And I usually try to hope somebody gives a testimony. Let me catch my breath there just a minute, you know. I'm a little short-winded sometimes. Sometimes I'm long-winded. But I'm going to try to sing a song tonight. Y'all pray for me and my family. You know, these are tough times for everybody. And we all go through troubles and trials and valleys and man, just up there. It's like Debbie was telling me the other day, there's been so much death things like this year. Every time you turn around, it's somebody you know, a friend. I lost an uncle last week, and Debbie lost somebody here lately. And it just seems like it's just all around us, and closer than it's ever been, seems like. So I don't know, but no better place to be than the house of the Lord. So y'all pray for me. Empty and broken, I came back to Him, a vessel unworthy, so
We really look back, he definitely does everything. Well, I thought a little bit here the last little while of the devotion I read. Actually, it wasn't even a devotion, it has some scriptures in it talking about how when we reach that other side, that the Lord will wipe away our tears, take away our pain, sorrows and things of that nature. And you got to thinking about the reason why he would do that. And I believe it's because it would take the focus off of us, put it on him. When you think about it, if we would just stay focused on him, I know that pain and that sorrow, it's still around, but I think it's a whole lot easier to go through when we're focused. I'm looking forward to that day. Be with you. From there on out, I believe it's going to be a wonderful place to be. I thank the Lord tonight as well, just for my salvation and his goodness to me, my family, this church. Someone else tonight, if not, I'm going to let Brother Luke take over if he's ready. Don't see him in the picture there, but there he is.
We're ready.
Okay.
I'm going to turn so I don't get feedback or anything, but we are experimenting because, again, we haven't planned on doing the services this way too often. And I understand there was a little bit of sound issues this morning, and we're hoping that the sound will be better tonight, but unfortunately the picture is smaller from what I'm seeing, and it was just kind of too late to make some changes to that. But with that aside, Gary and Ruby and Ronnie and Deb and Mace, y'all might have to move up if you want to see kind of what we're going to be showing you here. I've got the old-fashioned PowerPoint here tonight, and I know some that are on the front can probably see it okay, but you may or may not be able to see it if you're towards the back. But we are going to be in Judges chapter 6 tonight, and we're going to kind of start off with just the first couple of verses where we're going to take our text. But the thought that we're going to be using for tonight is, has God sent us? And, here in chapter 6, we're going to see a little bit of a familiar tone with some things. But, so, if you would, turn in your Bibles, and again, I'm having trouble seeing whether or not you're there. Certainly can't hear, but hope you're there with us. We're going to refer to several things here in Judges, and we're going to bounce over into Genesis here in just a few minutes as well. So, but let's start the first two verses in Judges chapter 6, and they read like this. And the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord delivered them into the hand of Midian 7 years. And the hand of Midian failed against Israel, and because of the Midianite, the children of Israel made them the dens which are in the mountains, and caves, and strongholds. So, as we said, we're going to be hearing a familiar tone here within this part of chapter 6 tonight, is that the people did evil in the sight of the Lord. And of course, the most complete explanation that we could give of that is that they actually abandoned the worship of the Lord to serve idols. And that has led to problems for the children of Israel multiple times as we've been going. But we are going to try to slow some things down a little bit tonight here in our study of Judges. I think we have done one chapter a week, every week so far. And we're not going to be able to do that tonight because there's just so much content that is here and even in some of the background of Judges chapter 6. So with that said, I'm going to ask you to turn back now to Genesis chapter 25. And we're just going to be there for just a couple of minutes, and then we will come back to the book of Judges. But Genesis 25. And we're going to look at the first 5 verses that are within that chapter. Genesis chapter 25. And starting at verse 1. And if you look at all these names, bear with me as we kind of go through these for just a minute. So, then again, Abraham took a wife, and her name was Keturah. And she bare him Imran, and Jokshan, and Medan, and Midian, and Ishbak, and Shua. And Jokshan begot Sheba and Dedan, and the sons of Dedan were Ashuram, and Lidsham, and Leamim. And the sons of Midian, and notice that name there, verse 4, we heard it back there in verse 2 as well. And the sons of Midian, Ephah and Epher, and Hanak, and Abadiah, and Eldah, all these were the children of Keturah. Abraham gave all that he had unto Isaac. So you can turn back now to Judges chapter 6, if you would. So Keturah married Abraham after that Sarah had died. So Sarah is now passed, and Abraham is about 140 years old at this time. Keturah was considered to be a virtuous woman, which is how, of course, that she was able to get hooked up with Abraham to begin with, is because of her godly calling and his godly calling as well. So after that they were married, they had 6 sons, and obviously we want to focus a little bit on Midian for just a moment. So Midian was Abraham's son, but Midian's descendants, they became bitter enemies of Israel in the days of Moses, obviously a little bit further down the road. So the Midianites, they then, of course, they were allies with the Moabites, and the Ammonites, and some of the others in their hostility towards the children of Israel. So again, you see how that some of these family ties that are there, but yet for whatever reason, there were hostilities that developed. So again, back in Judges chapter 6, it mentions there the dens and the caves, back in verse 2. That was the hiding places for the Israelites whenever the Midianites invaded. Now, 7 years, as it says there, 7 years that the Midianites were in over Israel. So 7 years can be a long time. But yet, this is actually, and again, this is where I hope you're able to see this, but if not, you'll be able to hear me at least anyway. So as that 7 years can be a long time, the captivity, or under the rule of the Midianites, or under the hiding of the Midianites, if you will, is actually one of the shortest times that the children of Israel went through, as if they were serving under an enemy. So some of the things that we've already heard about back in chapter 3 is that under Babylon, they were under them for 8 years. Under Moab, it was 18 years. And again, we heard about this back in chapter 3. At the end of chapter 3, if you remember, it was only one verse, but the Philistines, that was actually an unknown amount of time, so we don't know exactly how long that was. So a couple of weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, back in chapter 4, we heard about the first captivity under the Canaanites, which was 20 years. So again, longer. Now we get here in chapter 6 to the Midianites, 7 years. looking forward into the future, some things that we're going to be hearing about all the way up. We jump to chapter 10 at this point, but the Philistines and the Ammonites, that was 18 years. And then we get one more time with the Philistines at 40 years, as that jumps all the way up into chapter 13. So you look at all of this time, and it's been the same problem all along, is that the people did evil in the sight of the Lord. And whenever that they did evil in the sight of the Lord, there was these different years of captivity or rule that they were under. So because of disobedience, punishment is what would come to Israel. God would withdraw his protection from them, and there were others that were able then to enjoy the fruits of their labors. So the Midianites, they actually, at this point in time, they friended up or allied up with, if we could phrase it that way, with the Amalekites and with, as it says in verse 3 or 4 there, the children of the east. Now the children of the east, they were some tribes that were nomads, and they were possibly people that Israel had evicted out of this part of the country where they were in. So what was going on? Why all of this was important? Again, there's just a lot of history that we're trying to cram in here to a small amount of time if we can, is that what would happen is Israel, they planted their wheat and their barley in the fall. So if an enemy would then come in the wintertime or in early spring, they would be able to pasture their sheep, their cattle, their camels on all these fields of the grain that was growing. If they were to come in the summer, they could raid the threshing floors and the grain from them. So this is really important. Some of the story that goes around Gideon, who we are, of course, going to get introduced to in this chapter. So the Bible tells us here that the enemy came as grasshoppers. So you can imagine, if you've ever seen a lot of grasshoppers out in a field of grass, is that they just came, they covered the green valleys, and they left them desolate. They came in from the east, they pushed over into Gaza, so they set up camp, they stayed in an area until that pasture was completely exhausted, and then they moved on. As they went, they picked up the Israelites' livestock, leaving nothing behind. So now, you might be wondering, it's like, okay, now wait a minute. Where were the Israelites? So again, think back to verse 2. They were in the dens and the caves. They were hiding out. They were being oppressed. But yet, all of this, if you'll jump down to verse 6, here in Judges chapter 6, verse 6. So if you'll jump there with me for a second, verses 6 and 7. And Israel was greatly impoverished because of the Midianites, and the children of Israel cried unto the Lord. And it came to pass when the children of Israel cried unto the Lord because of the Midianites. So again, 7 years. This oppression went on for 7 years while that Israel hid in the dens and the caves. These limestone caves, they were very, very large. They were huge. Some of the caves were actually able to hold up to about 4,000 people. So with dens and caves that were that large, they could hide small amounts of wheat, small amounts of barley, even a few sheep and a few cows, but the majority of their livestock was left out. So that's why that the Midianites, the Amalekites, and the children of the east, is that whenever they come through, they were able to take most of what belonged to the children of Israel. So they managed to live, but they were impoverished, as we hear there in verse 6. In other words, they were reduced to poverty, and they cried out unto God. The next few verses, of course, is that God was responding in that he sent a prophet who reminded them that their trouble that they were facing was due to their disobedience. And, this has not been intentional in my thought, in my thinking, in my thoughts, or my preparation of things, but, I thought about how some things are now beginning to tie together, about some of our lessons on Wednesday night and some of even the message this morning that we shared. So, I'm going to kind of beat that drum for just a minute, because if you'll think about what we've heard in 1 Peter, what we heard in Deuteronomy chapter 8, the message that keeps getting beat into the ears of God's people is that disobedience unto God leads to trouble. We see that out the history of time with the children of Israel, and I think that even in the history of the world today that we can see it. So whether we need reminded to obedience or whether we need to walk the talk, my mind just kept going back to the words of Joshua again as he was speaking unto the children of Israel in chapter 24, verse 15, one that is very familiar to probably everyone tonight. It says, "And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and in my house, we will serve the Lord." And I think of that message and how important that it is today that we as the church, that we establish that message today. Is for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. You think about today serving the Lord, that is our goal, that is our purpose, and that's what we're pushing for. But it really needs to be a strong message. A verse that we didn't read was verse 10 to you. We didn't read that verse into your hearing, but at the end of that verse, it says there, as God was speaking unto them, "But you have not obeyed my voice." You see that God sent that message by the prophets unto them. "You have not obeyed my voice." What a very short, what a very pointed accusation that God had unto his people. You've not obeyed. So here is the trouble that you're in. All right. Let's jump up to verse 11 now. Here in Judges chapter 6. Verse 11, and we're only going to read down through verse 14, so follow along here with us if you would. "And there came an angel of the Lord, sat under an oak, which was in Ophrah, that pertained unto Joash the Abizarite. And his son Gideon threshed wheat by the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him, and said unto him, The Lord is with thee, thou mighty man of valor. Gideon said unto him, O my Lord, if the Lord be with us, why then is all this befallen us? And where be all his miracles which our fathers told us of, saying, Did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord hath forsaken us and delivered us into the hands of the Midianites. And the Lord looked upon him and said, Go in this thy might, and thou shalt save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Have not I sent thee? Wow. All right. So now, here is, in these verses, is a very familiar chore to the farmers back at this time. But this chore is going on in a very unfamiliar place. So Gideon was needing or was wanting, he was trying to thresh a little bit of wheat. Ordinarily, this would have been done on a threshing floor. So we're talking about wide open space. The wind would be able to blow the chaff. After that, the threshing sledge or the threshing board was pulled over the grain by the oxen. Again, you're talking about a big, wide open area. So this type of this wide open setting, they couldn't do this because then you would be open to a raid by the enemy. So Gideon was actually hiding in the winepress to do his work secretly. So it was going to be a lot harder. You're doing it in a smaller area. You're not going to have the open wind. You're not going to have the oxygen. You're not going to have all this. But this is why that it's secret. So again, he's hid and he's trying to do this. So here what we're finding is what's known as the call of Gideon, an important time in Gideon's life. So this was something that was completely unexpected by Gideon at this point, unexpected by him. But yet at the same time, it was also unexpected by anyone within the nation of Israel. All of the land has been now been given over to idolatry. God always has a way of finding his servant. So, at this point, with Israel being helpless, a strong leader is concealed within that group. Within that group that has now switched to worshiping an idol. Well, finding a leader sounds very great, it sounds very noble, and obviously it sounds like something that was needed. But here's Gideon. Now, if you kind of picked out the content of those verses 11 to 14, as we were reading, Gideon was the youngest within his family. Now, we're talking about a family that was considered to be, I'll say, insignificant, because they weren't known. They were poor, and here he was, the youngest in that family. He had no religious training. He had no political training. He was just a young man trying to get some grain. So I want everybody to look in a mirror, figuratively speaking, because I know you don't have one right now, but I want you to look in a mirror. So just imagine, because you all know, everybody knows what our face looks like. Look in that mirror. When you look in that mirror, do you see somebody that is strong? Do you see a noble leader within that mirror? Do you see somebody with exquisite religious training? Do you see somebody that has politically trained and ready to just take on the leadership of a country? Do you see a mighty man of valor? Well, as I was thinking about the thought for this message tonight, again, I was asking the question to myself, because I've got to ask it to me if I'm asking it to you. And it was very simple of no. We don't see any of those things within ourselves. God chooses each and every one of us to do the job he wants us to do. So, Gideon was wondering, where has God been? We've heard all these stories about how that God delivered our forefathers in Egypt. Where has he been? We've been under his rule for 7 years, and we've been, we've struggled, and we've been in hiding in the dens and the caves. Where is God? God is always on time. That is something that we all know. That is something today that we even struggle with an understanding. There are times that we all have been just like Gideon, and we've questioned that. But God always shows up on time. So here in this account with Gideon, he shows up, through an angel to deliver the message. So obviously, again, now remember, Israel was an idolatrous nation. So it is believed at this point that Gideon's family was idolatrous, because there was nothing that stood out about his family being different or being godly. So by the conversation, it appears that he was not completely ignorant of God, because he does have a little knowledge, but we wouldn't exactly call him the poster child of a trained hero that's now being called to come and save the day. That's not what we're thinking about at this point of this description of Gideon. So, and we know that there's other things that people know and have heard about Gideon, but this part of the story is important for us to grasp, because it's relatable to who we are. This part about Gideon is needed for our lives. So, we think about spiritual blessings, and whether it was Gideon, whether it's you and me, and again, this ties into some of the things that we spoke about this morning. Spiritual blessings are hard to be realized whenever that there is an absence of material prosperity. Now, that's a very worldly, earthly, fleshly way of thinking. It's a human way of thinking. Let me phrase it another way. If I don't have material prosperity, then it's hard for me to realize spiritual blessings. That's the way that the world thinks. So back in the time of Gideon, back in our, even in our day today, in our present day, that if people would say it like this, that if your God, little g, if your God is with you, then you're materially prosperous. So there were a lot of people that looked as, okay, so the children of Israel, they're in the dens of the cave. They're impoverished. They're poor. Their God is not with them. The same God that delivered them. See, from a spiritual perspective, they were really, really struggling. So whenever that a voice tells somebody that is struggling, that God is with you, there's oftentimes doubt and skepticism will follow. Maybe, again, remember now the relatability part, this is something that we can relate to. There have been times in all of our lives where that we've struggled, where that we've had doubt, where that we've had skepticism. But at this point, that divine presence that came unto Gideon, you and I have witnessed the divine presence of God in our life. So at this point, the blessing of Gideon is what we would call potential. There's a lot of potential. It's not there, but there's a lot of potential in the blessing that was being put upon Gideon. So what does that mean? So the blessing was to begin within him, but it had to be communicated out to others. So now I want you to think about the potential that is inside of us, the potential that is in each and every one of us. We need to communicate those blessings that are within us to others. We need to share that spiritual blessing because we could be holding the blessing of a nation. Now I know there's a lot of people that are here that say, Brother Luke, I'm just little old me. It's just little us. We're the Gospel Chapel. We're in Daniels, West Virginia. There's no way that we can impact that many people. I want you to know today, I want us to know and realize and never doubt that here within our life, within our own circle, within our own family, we've used that term sphere of influence before, wherever we are, if we are maintaining that spiritual blessing within inside of ourselves, we are holding that instead of sharing it out. That blessing can impact those that are around us. And do I believe within my heart that blessings can be spread and reach the nation? Yes, I do. Because that's just how God works. All of us today, we need the assurance from that divine presence of God. But yet as he asked unto Gideon, have not I sent thee? Mankind is not today, and we need to know this as the church, that mankind is not at liberty to follow their own thoughts. Man is not at liberty to follow their own goals. Whenever that heavenly voice speaks within him, you think about today that as that divine presence spoke unto Gideon, I've never had an angel appear to me, but the divine presence of God, through the working of his Spirit, has dealt with me time and time again in my life. And how today we understand that we see in society that it has turned a deaf ear unto that divine voice of God. Now, bear with me here for just a minute. Hold on, this might be one of those earth-shattering statements that I'm about to make. I believe that the church of today, they've not gone completely deaf. The church is not completely turned away. But I will say that we, as the church, are guilty of ignoring that divine voice. I look around, and especially, human interaction was something that was beginning to struggle. And then whenever COVID-19 hit, human interaction took an even greater struggle. It's becoming more and more and more challenged because with the distance that it creates, with the separation that it creates, with the non-gathering of things, to me, it is a very bold and a very true sign of how man communicates with God. And that's not very well. The voice or that presence of God, we could even say that the Spirit of God brings our life to a higher plane. The presence of God, the Spirit of God should be driving our life to a higher plane. It should be lifting us up. If we're ignoring it, it's not lifting us up. God is still there. So again, you think about the scriptures, because realistically, if God be for us, who can be against us, right? The presence of God within us as Christians, it should really bring out strong convictions within us to follow His lead and to bless the nation, to bless His people. We should be pouring out the things that are within us. The power from God is infinite. There is no ending. The power of God is infinite. It's beyond description. It's beyond measurement. That all the powers of this world are finite. That's why Gideon was having a little bit of struggles while he was hiding in the winepress, threshing his wheat, wondering where God was, where He had been, how He was going to deliver. But all the while, God was calling him to be the rescue for His people. In closing, so be finding a song if you would. In the call of Gideon, if we could relate the call of Gideon to the call of the Gospel Chapel, if we could relate all of Gideon to the call of Luke Richmond, to the call of you as an individual, the person that's in that mirror we were talking about, if we could relate that call of Gideon, us as an individual, to us as a group, has God sent us? And if God has sent us, He will take note of us. He will pay attention to us. He knows all about us. And He will sustain us when our strength is waning, whenever the trouble comes. Has God sent us? Our service that we do for Him, it is not for earthly gain. He is our Master. He's our King of Kings. He is our Lord of Lords. But as the church today, as His children, we are the saints of God. But as the saints, we are sustained by the hope of the crown of glory that fadeth not away. And I think today about that crown. That crown of glory, it's not going to fade. The things in this life, they're going to fade. The crops that are out in the field and the livestock that is out in the field, it can be raided and it can be taken care of. The possessions that are in the cupboards and in the barns and all the different places, all those things can go away. But our heavenly reward will not fade away. So as the call went out to Gideon, the call goes out to us today. God is asking us, has He not sent us? Has He not sent us? So with that song of invitation tonight, we're going to ask you, again, I know that our crowd is small in number tonight. But has God sent us? God today, He has sent us to do His work. If you need to pray, the altar's open. We invite you to come pray.
Page 309.
Peggy's waiting on you.
Back over to you now.
I'll just say this, and then I'll turn it over to you, Brother Mason, because again, it's hard to see and hear, but Lord willing, we'll be back in live service on Wednesday with everybody, Lord willing. And again, barring no complications, we'll actually be at Sister Connie's funeral on Tuesday, so Lord willing, we'll see everybody there if you're able to make that. So, Brother Mason.
All right, we'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and it's always good to come in and worship in God's house, no matter how many or how less that we do have. I think I was telling Brother Jeff this morning, you know, the sound was a little crazy. This is different. I won't call Brother Luke crazy, but I know this was just a spur of the moment thing, but the devil, what we did this morning, what we're doing tonight, the devil he's madder than a hornet, because he thought, well, we could shut this down, but praise God we didn't. So again, I appreciate everyone coming out, and just thank you all for coming and worshiping. So with that being said, the announcements, Sister Connie's funeral will be Tuesday. I think you know the arrangements. Church is putting on a dinner that afternoon, and I think Sister Ruby and the others have sort of got together. If you've not been contacted, just contact them. Wednesday night service, anything next weekend?
Saturday, Luke, is Belinda still planning on doing the thing Saturday?
Actually, that's going to get rescheduled. We're probably looking at going up to the following weekend.
Okay.
We do have the Wednesday night for the kids.
Yes.
We're doing like their after play. We're just a little delayed in
Right.
that, right, Joel?
Right.
We're just doing pizza Sundays and games. So if you want to bring out a board game or whatever, we're just going to do that, whatever, on Wednesday night. They can bring friends if they want to.
Anyone else? That being said, Brother Ronnie, if you would, could you dismiss us tonight, please?
Dear most precious Heavenly Father, Lord, we come to you tonight, Lord, we just thank you for the blessing of being able to be with you in your house tonight, Lord. Lord, just pray for the ones that couldn't be here, whatever their issues may be, Lord. There's some collective, Lord, out there, we just pray that you just touch it. Lord, we just pray for this virus. We just pray, God, that you just build a hedge around the church and keep it away from us, Lord. Lord, just pray for the ones that have it. We pray, God, that they'll come through it just fine, Lord, without any struggle, Lord. We know there's many out there sick with, Lord. We pray, God, you just touch them. Lord, we pray that you just go with each and every one here tonight, Lord. Lord, we pray, God, you just keep them safe. Bring them back at our next appointed time. All this, we ask in Jesus' precious and holy name. Amen.